Any questions? Too many questions, no questions.
I have two actually. One is concerning times.
Yes.
You have the time slider, which means that you break down every temporal wording to time periods, like Athens starting 750 BC.
Yeah.
How do you do that? If you get time like Roman, Augustan, well, I mean that's Wolfgang's business, but do you do that in the background automatically, or or do you just take the data which comes as numbers and skip out the other ones which are not numerical values for periods? So what's the...
I would imagine, and you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but yes, I mean, if we're getting the data from the databases who we're connecting with, then whatever format it's in for them is going to be the format in which we're rendering it. But I would imagine that has the potential to kind of extend. I mean, we're not limited to a particular time period. It goes as early as or as late as the data that's coming in.
Just a question, am I looking for times or time slides?
Yeah.
And just knowing that I only get records which have a time by year and not by time by literal values.
Yeah.
So that's just some information I lose because the system is not working on that. And that's why I'm asking how that's been done.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to assume yes, but I'm also going to check that and follow it up because it's an important question, right? Because there's potential that stuff
I mean,
get left out.
I mean, Wolfgang and Peripleo, that's just the projects.
Yeah.
Like you do that with the places, to do that with the times, to get that relation, to get literal term and then have times as close or precise as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a second question. I didn't understand how you merge different identifiers to one place. Like if you have for Athens or for other places, you have 4, 5, 6 IDs related to that. And how do you know that Athens by wiki data ID is the same Athens as a Pelagios ID?
Yeah.
How is that actually merged? Is that done by coordinates or by other means, or how do you know that multiple identifiers mean actually still the same place?
I mean, there's always going to be an element of risk in that because it does sometimes happen that you get these random outliers that pop up when you're looking for something. But generally, we know that Athens is Athens in Greece and not Athens in Georgia because, yes, the gazetteers that we're using have them connected to coordinates. And so it's the GIS that connects us to, and therefore we can merge that stuff using the gazetteer interconnection format, which is this magical switch that gets flicked somewhere in like the data ether, but that aligns all of the gazetteers that we are connected to or that connect to us, aligns them all so that they all point to the same place. Yeah. I mean, if you are interested in the interconnection format, there's a whole section in our GitHub repository which kind of explains precisely how that stuff works, and I can't explain it myself, I'm afraid.
But at least there's some tool doing that
based
on the coordinates
absolutely.
attached to them.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just too risky, particularly because one of the problems we have is that we have gazetteers that refer to very early periods and we have gazetteers that refer to contemporary periods, but there's always going to be a risk that in between, like roughly between the kind of 13th and 19th centuries, there's going to be a whole bunch of places that could mix up that data. So we need to make sure that everything runs through the same filter.
Any more questions? I had about myself about the co-occurrence of entities. So the example where you showed the crocodiles. I guess it's based on some kind of context. So when there is the word crocodile and the mention of a place in a given context, how big is that context? Is it a number of paragraphs, sentences? Is it the whole document? The whole document probably no.
I think it depends. Okay. I mean, it's the whole of Herodotus in this case. Like we've got all of, and this is a setup, right? Like we went in and we created the crocodiles. But yes, in theory, like it is the whole document.
It's the whole document.
Yeah, potentially. someone had to go and find all the crocodiles in the rodents.
No, it's to have an idea about the granularity of what
and I mean that's always the difficulty for us, and in fact it's one of the reasons why we've resisted, for example, using Wikidata as a kind of pseudo gazetteer, because that would be ideal, right? You've got the whole of Wikipedia's worth of data sitting out there, but it's that granularity that is exactly a problem. We need to make sure that the context in which we're allowing people to search is clear enough for them to get results that are useful, but at the same time broad enough to not be too restrictive to them. And that for us has been a problem with some of the data sources that would be nice to use, but don't quite meet those kind of rather exacting standards of granularity. Which also I think we're hoping, we will be able to improve upon as we can find more data sources to connect to, but it has to pass quite a rigorous usefulness test. Yeah.
And the other question I had is more from the usability point of view. I wonder if you can say something, but the impression is that the number of steps you can have in a session of using Peripleo is actually quite, you can do many steps because it's meant to do it. So a search that starts from a starting point and then you find interesting links that you can expect and you follow them. What were the challenges of translating that into a usable tool that runs in a browser? And also not just in terms of the implementation, but also in terms of the feedback you get from the users that are using it. Do they find it useful? Are you hitting the limits of what you can actually do in a browser?
I mean, that's always going to be a little bit of an issue because we don't have a massive database behind this. That's where really leveraging other people's data makes our lives a lot easier. It doesn't slow things down particularly, but one of the things that Rainer considers all the time is at what point does it become too much to make it a useful browser-based tool. So far we're kind of okay, and our server setup is good enough to enable us to not have any problems yet. As we populate more information into Peripleo, that may be something that we'll run up against. And fortunately, we have an extremely vocal community who are very quick to let us know when stuff isn't working very well. And Twitter's very helpful in that respect. So Rainer will often run some tests and ask for feedback and get almost immediate feedback from people. And if anyone uses any of these, please let us know, because we don't really have the capacity to do major user testing, so we rely on our community to let us know how it goes. For now, it's okay. We've got the usability isn't really an issue yet, but there is always that risk, and we have to be cognizant of it.
You mentioned the possibility of having multiple users at the same time working not on Peripleo but on Recogito, annotating the same document. So this means can be used in a classroom with students doing, if you take a long test, split it and having the students sharing a document and using it.
So at the moment what happens is you create one account and everyone can log in using the same account at the same time. We don't yet, but we're working on it, have the ability for everyone to have individual accounts, and then you share the document that way. So it is centralized in as much as everyone logs into the same account rather than having their own accounts.
But in the future it might be possible to do the same.
Absolutely. We want to be able to make it easier for people to share their stuff that way too. I mean, the other thing that we're thinking about adding into Recogito is layered views. So when I mentioned the multispectral imaging, what would be really great, because these guys are discovering hidden countries and hidden people and all sorts of, images that they didn't even think were on these maps, is if we can have multiple views of the same map in one view on the browser, then people can work on the same thing, on the different layers at the same time in the same document. So we've been thinking about that, and if we find the time and the money, then we definitely want to implement it. But again, so far, people aren't uploading massive files into it. I mean, there is a limit on the file, but it's big enough for it not to be an issue yet. People aren't uploading massive stuff, and so far no one has run out of space So we're doing okay. Yeah.
More question.
How do you connect data sources? That means what would I need to do if I had a data source to connect it to you?
We would welcome you with open arms. So we have, the easiest way to do it is to send us an email and say, I've got this stuff, can we connect it? And then what we can do is we can work with you step by step to make sure that the data is in a form that can be used by us and that isn't too difficult for you to make any conversions that may need to be done. We also have a kind of how-to documentation, so you could do it on your own if you prefer. That's also possible. Basically, if you've got URIs and somehow you can get it into GeoJSON or JSON format, if it doesn't exist in that format yet, then it can be done. We've got, I didn't show a view of the data connections that we've got, but we've got everything from these massive data sets to people's Flickr streams. It's not a hugely difficult task, and we can work with you on that.
And the second question to Recogito, you told before that there's an auto recognition of place names, but this works only with English texts, or?
No, it doesn't, because we're using the Stanford GeoParser, which apparently recognizes other texts too. I didn't know that, but so it recognizes ancient Greek, and certainly I've uploaded some texts in German, and it has worked with those as well. If they exist out there in a gazetteer format that the GeoParser can find, then it'll recognize. Certainly Latin, Greek, German, so far we haven't had any problems. Oh, and Spanish as well. Yeah.
If there are no further questions, I think we can continue the informal discussion with all the embarrassing questions for our speaker with some wine. Before we thank our speaker again, just housekeeping information. The seminars are half here and half, so one time here, one time at the DAI in Dahlem. You will find on the website the link to the map, the precise address, also where to enter the building. Just to keep in mind, we will alternate between here and Dahlem for all the seminars throughout the year. And that's it. Many thanks again.
Thanks.